Good morning and welcome back to the coast. I'm super excited today to finally test out the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 lens, a lens that I've been wanting to test ever since it was released. So today I'm going to be heading up this coast to see if I can capture a couple of seascape images. During the video, if you see a V in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, that means the video footage or the photos were captured using this lens. A little bit later in the video, we'll be heading back to the office to test out this lens's image quality and to really pixel peep into the images to see how well it performs. So stick around to the end to find out my results. So let's crack on and see if we can find some images this morning. What a beautiful morning it is this morning, absolutely beautiful. So I've put the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 on the Fuji X-H2 to see what it looks like whilst we're vlogging. So I think the field of view is really nice actually, probably the sweet spot for vlogging. Not too wide, doesn't make my face look too distorted. I've got continuous autofocus turned on and the eye detection turned on. I've also got digital image stabilization turned on as well, so it'd be interesting to see if we've got any warpy corners as I'm walking around. So I'm going to head on a little bit further up this coast and see if we can make another image before we get back to the office and test out the image quality of this lens. So I've had a cracking morning so far, managed to capture a couple of images looking back towards the town, one out towards the sea just before the sun rose, and that was really cool. But right now I'm shooting towards the light in a very extreme test to see how this lens copes with the lens flare. I'm taking a couple of different exposures, one for the shadows and one for the bright highlights. I'm going to blend those images together in Lightroom to see how well this lens copes when shooting directly at harsh light. It is an extreme test, so make of it what you will. Let's talk about the features of this lens first before we get too far into it. So this lens is a 13mm wide angle prime lens, and it covers a 20mm equivalent if you're shooting on full frame cameras. So that's really appealing. There's nothing in the Fuji lineup really in terms of prime lenses that cover this focal length. So that's cool. It also has an aperture range of f1.4 through to f16, which means this lens appeals to a wide variety of photographers, from architectural to landscape to astro to event photographers. So yeah, this lens is going to be very, very appealing to a lot of people. And the build quality of this lens is extremely good. It's better than any Viltrox lens I have tested in the past, and I've tested all of the Fuji lineup, the 23, the 33, the 56 and the 85, and I've tested them all, and this has the best build quality. It has a clicked aperture as opposed to the other ones which just had the clickless aperture, and it feels really solid and really premium. It really does have the feel of a native Fuji lens. It does lack weather sealing though, which is maybe a bit of an issue for some people, but it does have a USB-C port in the lens mount, which means you can keep the lens updated should Viltrox release any firmware updates in the future. So I'm going to grab a couple more images here in this ridiculously harsh light and then head on up the coast a little bit to see if I can find some other compositions this morning. Whilst we're doing that, we're going to be testing out the autofocus and the video capabilities of this lens. Right, let's grab a couple more here and then we'll move on. So I have to say the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 seems to fit really nicely on the Fuji X-H2. It feels great in the hand, it really does. It really suits this camera, I think. It's not too dissimilar in size to the 10-24 f4 lens, just about 15 grams heavier and slightly taller and a little bit wider around the aperture ring, but yeah, fairly similar in terms of its feel on the camera itself. It's got a 67mm filter thread too and a metal lens hood. Here I took a moment to do a video autofocus test, racking focus using the touchscreen between these two rocks. And as you can see, it racks focus really smoothly, and there's very little focus breathing too, which is great, perfect for video shooters. Also, the STM motor is really silent, hardly any noise comes from this lens whatsoever, which again is perfect for anyone shooting video. So I'm pointing away from the sea now back towards these striking rock formations, these wonderful cliffs with their sweeping vertical strata and these amazing rock formations in the foreground. So I thought I'd do a lens comparison test on this particular scene with the Viltrox 13 and the Fuji 10-24 at 13mm, both shot f8. Just give me an idea how these two images compare, how the image quality compares, how the resolution compares on this 40 megapixel sensor. So it'd be great to take a look at those when we get back to the office. What a splendid morning, absolutely beautiful out there. Don't think I managed to get any portfolio images, but nonetheless, it was a great morning. Always a joy to be out with the camera, especially at the coast. So I'm going to take a look at a couple of different images here to test out the image quality. But before we get on to that, I just want to touch on a few different things. Firstly, vignetting. Well, vignetting is present when we're wide open, but as we stop the aperture down, when we get to around f5.6, the vignetting is almost gone. As you can see from this image, there's hardly any vignetting present at all, and that's with the profile corrections turned off in Lightroom. Also, in terms of color fringing and distortion, these are kept to a minimum, very, very well controlled throughout the aperture ranges I've found. So in case you're wondering, we're currently filming with the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 on the Fuji X-H2 with continuous autofocus turned on and also the eye detection turned on. Anyway, let's jump over here, take a look at a couple of images. So firstly, this image here is a scene which is particularly difficult for the camera to expose for. We've got incredibly bright highlights here in the sky and very dark shadows here on the right hand side. So in Lightroom, I've had to increase my shadows fully and reduce my highlights fully to be able to get the full dynamic range of this shot and not lose any detail in either the shadows or the highlights. So this is pushing a raw file as far as I would ever want to push it. Down here, look, we can certainly see heaps of detail, some nice detail in the shadows as well, and moving across here, clearly see some lovely details. So it's resolving that detail in the shadows really well, which is great. Yeah, this is an extreme test. I wouldn't really want to push a raw file this far, but I think it stacked up really well. So I wanted to take a look at another image here, the one where we were shooting directly at that really harsh sunlight. This is a multiple bracketed exposure, one for the highlights, one for the shadows, and one in between, blended together in Lightroom using the HDR feature. And this is the file that it spat out after I'd done some editing to it. Obviously, I've lifted the shadows and reduced the highlights again. As we can see this flare coming through the image. This area at the bottom right hand corner, this light patch, is actually light coming through the rocks. That's not the flare. And this sort of hexagonal looking shape here again is light reflecting onto the sand. So that the flare is just these purple patches here, which, considering the angle in which we're shooting at, the flare is present, but I think it is fairly well controlled. Now I want to move on to the next image, where this is perhaps something that I would maybe typically shoot if the sun was high in the sky, and that's just having it peeking round the landscape like this. And as we can see in this shot, there's no flare at all, which is great. Again, this is bracketed exposure. The only little bit of artifact that I could see in this image was this tiny little area of purple in this rock. It's the only artifact I could actually find in this image. I've got this almost like a sun star around the edge of this rock here, which is quite pleasing actually. It looks really nice. So no flaring in this image. So this is perhaps typically how I would shoot if I was shooting directly towards the sun, just having that sunlight poking over either the horizon, a cloud, or an object such as the cliff here. To finish off, let's take a look at the Viltrox 13mm and the Fuji 10 to 24mm comparison at 13mm. So this is the 10 to 24 and this is the Viltrox 13mm. The first thing that I noticed was the distortion is better controlled with the Viltrox lens. You'd expect that with a prime lens over a zoom lens. Image quality wise, if I put these up side by side, in the middle, the Viltrox lens is just slightly sharper than the 10 to 24. Only slightly, there's hardly anything to see in it at all. But when we get out towards the corners, or the edges of the frame, we can clearly see there's a lot more detail. The resolution is better and the sharpness is better around the edges of the frame. So that is something you typically expect with a prime lens versus a zoom lens. Obviously with a zoom lens, you have some trade-offs because you've got the flexibility in your focal range. Whereas a prime lens, you've got a fixed focal length, meaning you haven't got that flexibility, but perhaps better image quality. And that's exactly what we find here. We find that the Viltrox lens is optically better throughout the frame, which is great. Now, that's not to say the 10 to 24 is a bad lens. It is not a bad lens. The 10 to 24 is a wonderful lens. It's great for landscape photography and it's always in my kit bag. But it's really interesting just to compare the two. I would expect a prime lens to be better. And that's what we find. So that obviously means a good thing for the Viltrox. So to conclude, I think this lens is going to be great for a broad range of photographers. I can see me using this shooting weddings. I think it'd be great for shooting, say, a wide scene on the dance floor. I also think it'd be great for wedding filmmakers as well. If you need to get that wide shot at the back of a church, for example, I think it could be wonderful for that. I also think it'd be great for astrophotography. Now, if you're into your astrophotography, this is an area of photography that I've never tried before, but now I live in a dark sky location. So it's something that's been in the back of my mind for a little while. I'd really like to give it a crack. So if you're interested in finding out how I fare at astrophotography, be sure to subscribe to the channel because I'm hoping to get an astrophotography vlog out in the next sort of couple of months, I hope anyway. And it will be with this lens because I think it will be a cracking astrophotography lens. Also for landscape photography, I think if you're wanting optimal quality and you don't mind sacrificing obviously a zoom lens, then this fits really well because if you've got the 18 to 55 or the 16 to 50, you know, this is a lot wider than the 16 or the 18, so it sits well if you've got one of those zoom lenses and you perhaps don't have the 10 to 24. In terms of the versatility of this lens, it's great for shooting video. The autofocus is super silent and really well controlled. I think it's doing a great job now, hopefully. And all in all, yeah, I think all round it's a great lens. I wish it was weather sealed, and I'd like to see Viltrox implement weather sealing into their future lenses. So all in all, I think it's a thumbs up from me and I highly recommend this lens if you're looking for a wide angle prime. So that's it for today. Please do consider hitting the like button if you got something from this video, subscribing if you'd like to see more content, and please do consider checking out the Photographers Clubhouse too if you'd like to support this channel. Every month we do a monthly challenge, there's monthly videos on there too, heaps of content, a forum for members to engage with each other and share their photos. Yeah, cracking space for the photographer. Anyway guys, until next week, take care and I'll see you soon.